Good evening, UK Crime Book Club. I've spent the day in Brian Cave's mind, and I've got loads to say. So, without further ado, Brian, give yourself an introduction, show off your book covers, and let's get into it because I'm excited.
Okay. Well, I'm Brian Caves, writing as Brian W. Caves, and I'll quickly run through the books. The first one that I wrote, well, the first fully written, A Long Way from Home. Um, shall I describe them now, or we'll go through that in a minute, one by one,
Describe,
or what?
describe it, yeah, describe it now, and then we'll go through it
Okay.
at the end as well.
Okay. 1961, America, the deep south of Georgia, around the swamps, a small town whereby lots of racism, as you can imagine at that time. Kennedy's first year in office, and lots of young black girls have been missing. Have gone missing over number of years. And a friend of a friend, just briefly, gets in touch with an ex-cop from Chicago who's turned sort of private eye, and invites him all the way down to Georgia to try and find these girls, and in particular this lady's young daughter. She's about 14, and so he buries himself in the fictional town of Paradise Creek, and gets to know a few people. Mostly, given a southern town, they're a very close knit community, and they don't take too kindly to him poking his nose in. But he does get to the truth, and he discovers where all these bodies are and who has been the person responsible for abducting them and murdering them. It's 100,000 words, this book, fairly lengthy read, but it's very much in the style, if anybody out there knows, of Pete Dexter, Paris, God, Paris Trout, Pete Dexter's National Book Award, Paris Trout, which is fantastic. It's in that kind of style, or Ron Rash, um, Flannery O'Connor, people like that. Very deep South literature. Um, and it's really my favorite kind of setting and genre, to be perfectly honest. Although setting things in the States doesn't always appeal to people, and also using American spelling, how dare I, also doesn't appeal to people, but there you go.
The
So
word
that's
vice
that
was
one.
the only one that grated on me. I could cope with everything but vice with an S.
Okay. Um, whilst throwing around a few ideas for a second story to follow on from that, which I am actually writing, um, I decided to throw my head into 4 short stories set in America. These are all lunchtime reads, and a book called Consequences, which doesn't really need much explaining, but they're all twist in the tail. Absolutely, they're all crime thriller, and yeah, set in America, and more modern day, but a gap, a filler, if you like. Then, because everybody kept telling me to do so, including my friends who bought A Long Way from Home and read it and loved it, they wanted me to do something similar, but in the UK. So I came up with this character, Simeon Kane,
Mhm.
who ex detective sergeant, and he's now turned private investigator. He's got his own little company, and a beautiful woman comes to see him one day and hires him to find the truth behind her father's murder. And she thinks it is murder and more sinister than the police have decided it is, because this murder occurred 9 to 10 months beforehand, and they put it down to a violent random mugging. But it's so much more than that, and he sets out on a trail of understanding the translation business, which is what I work in, secret codes, hidden messages, and putting all the clues together with the help of his friend a detective inspector. Um, but Simeon Kane is, yeah, he's head first into this, and there is a massive but realistic twist at the end that so far nobody has seen coming.
Oh, I look
This
forward
book's
to
slightly
that.
shorter. It's only 70,000 words, but it's crime and intrigue and blackmail and everything else and murder all the way through. That's that one. Now, I decided to venture into horror. And after writing a short story for UK CBC Shorts at Halloween last year, titled Under the Skin, it was about a hired assassin who is sent to terminate a beautiful woman who's on the verge of brokering an illegal arms deal. And he meets up with her in a hotel. What he doesn't realize is that she's actually a vampire. And things happen. She takes over. They become a couple and they actually fall in love. It is a love story. And it's called I Am What I Am, but it's all about the change that he goes through from this hired assassin to a vampire. And I decided to extend the short story and turn it into a novella and give them further adventures. So you have this novella, and I'm going to add to this as well because I want to. This this is very much about him, the change, and how he now understands life through her eyes. And she's been around for centuries. The follow-on is going to be more about her and they're coming together and how things happen. There's a lot of blood and gore in it, but it is essentially a love story. It's not for the faint-hearted. Then, following on from a short story in my book Consequences, The Burning Man, I decided that needed a bit more, so I turned that into a novella as well. And it's got a brand new cover on it.
I was going to say, mine's got a different
Different,
cover.
yeah, it's got a different cover. Um, and The Burning Man is about the two slacker friends in Georgia, where else, who get a job working for the mob and to do with drugs. And they decide to do a little bit of work on the side to earn more money. And let's just say, over one really horrible, long, nasty weekend, all sorts of things happen to them. Not all of them good.
That's an
Again, there's
understatement.
murder. Have you read it? Oh, right. So there's a lot of things happen to them: murder, blackmail, intrigue, kidnapping, all sorts of stuff. And again, probably an ending that people may not see coming. So that's that one. I had real fun extending that into a novella. And having written uh, a couple of horror short stories, different types, like Haunted House and things like that, I decided to put three of them together in this book, which has just been released, called At the End. So that's three horror stories, which involves monsters in a forest in Maine, in USA. The other two are set in the UK, in the deep countryside, in a creepy old mansion. And another one is a horror writer's descent into madness. Or is it reality? So there we go. That's what I do. I chop and change and flit about between horror, thriller, mystery, and all sorts of stuff, really.
Well, thank you. That was a brilliant introduction. So, just before we went live, I was saying that I've spent the day in your head because I've been
Yeah,
reading
I,
along
I
with
didn't
you.
feel anything, but I did have a bit of a headache.
It's me rooting around in there. So, it did make me chuckle actually with The Burning Man that I read kind of last night and finished this morning. Um, you did mention, well, I felt like you gave a nod to one of the characters, duckweed. It made me chuckle when you mentioned duckweed, as in the plants.
Yes,
So that
yeah, the
made me
character
chuckle.
Duckweed Dave.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's
it's a
him
good
and there's
story.
and his friend are the two guys that get involved with a mob with the mob through another friend who's just come out of prison, and they end up being a go-between in terms of drugs trafficking between Florida and Georgia, and they decided to start skimming and making a little bit of money on the side. It doesn't go
What could
very well.
possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong when you mess with the mob, huh?
Oh, shall I be brave or
But
shall I
it is
back
a
off?
it is a brutal weekend.
Oh,
It may be a novella and short, and I think it could be extended even more. But
yeah.
it's a very brutal weekend. Would
So,
you agree?
gotcha. Oh, there's so many things I want to say, but I can't because that'll give things away. So,
Oh
I want
right,
to know
okay.
why you set books in Georgia.
Ah, that's interesting. I don't know why, but I've always had this. Well, I do know, possibly know why now, but I have never particularly taken to setting stories in the UK. I don't know why, and I've always been fascinated with the deep south of America,
Hmm.
mainly because I'm a fan of blues and jazz, and I'm also interested in voodoo. Not that I practice it myself, but I've done a lot of research into it, and there's a little element of that in A Long Way from Home.
There is.
Um,
Is it
yeah,
Vivian? Lady
and I've
Vivian?
also been sorry,
Is her name Vivian?
Veronique,
Veronique,
Miss
thank you. I couldn't
Veronique.
think then, Miss Veronique. I've only
Yeah.
heard it today.
Um,
Memory shocking. Sorry,
but
carry
I've always had this. I've always had this fascination with the deep south through music, through interests in looking at voodoo and what it all means, and also various films that I've seen. One in particular, which I've seen about 20 times, called Mississippi Burning, which I think is an incredible film about race problems and murder and white supremacy and things like that. Uh, a tremendously powerful film directed by Alan Parker. Um, lots of things have influenced me, um, but I've always had this affinity with the United States anyway, and I never really, apart from those reasons, understood why I had this pull because I I was adopted at a very, very young age. I was months old, way back in 1956. And that was back in the day when unmarried women in the UK were not allowed to go home
on.
with their child without a husband. So I was adopted and adopted by an Italian mother and an English father. And I spent 24 years living with them before I got married, so on and so forth. Long story short, they both passed away, oh, what, 10 years ago, no, 15 years ago now. And I've set about trying to find my natural birth mother. And I found her. And we are best mates. And I have two half brothers, cousins, uncles I didn't know about, who all of whom are beautiful people, really are. They've accepted me into their world with open arms. And it's been about, I don't know, 8, 9 years since I found them, maybe as much as 10 now. And I since discovered that my father was American, my natural father, and he was over here after the war in the 50s, stationed at an American Air Force base over here, and which is where he met my mother. Sadly, he didn't stay around. He decided to go back to America, but he came from New Hampshire. I've never found him, and to be honest, I've never really looked. But he would probably be about 85, 86 now. And I suddenly realised perhaps that's another link to why I have this affinity with America. I don't know. But there we go. That's why I set the books there. I just happen to, apart from a few stories that I've written that are set here,
Hmm.
I just love the Deep South. I find it totally intriguing, the swamps, everything, as you probably saw
Yeah.
in A Long Way from Home.
So I've spent the day, as I said, swimming around in your head with Tom Bale. And
Oh yeah.
where did the idea for Tom come from?
Well, there's a couple of reasons why I set the book in the early 60s. One, I don't have to research too much into the DNA process and start looking at a lot of forensic evidence, which is just hard work, because I'm not so much a procedure man. And secondly, I wanted to free a character from the ties of police procedure and make him a little bit more of a rebel,
Mm.
but also give him a very, very solid reason for going 1,000 miles south to the deep swamps of Georgia to find this girl, this woman's daughter. And at the beginning of the book, towards the beginning of the book, you know that he loses his wife.
Mm.
He descends into this awful place, which a lot of people do when their partners are killed. And he comes out of it and he meets this black piano player, and little Joe Williams, who he forms a great relationship with in Chicago, his hometown, his home city. And little Joe Williams comes from the deep south of Georgia, and they get to know each other. And then because little Joe Williams saves his life one night while he's getting beaten up down an alley, Tom Bale, this ex-Chicago homicide cop, uh, pledges his sort of undying help. And so when little Joe Williams passes away through a heart attack and they send his body home to the deep south, his sister finally calls up Tom Bale and says, "Hey, my daughter's gone missing. Can you come and help us? The local police are doing nothing," so on and so forth. So his character kind of came out of a desire of not wanting a policeman,
Mm.
wanting to get somebody who's more, not necessarily maverick, because that's been done 1,000 times, but somebody who's just away from all the procedures and the evidence and that. And he has to use his brain and good old fingerprints and, you know, to sort this murder out. And that's where he came from. Now, perhaps I should go back a little bit. I first wrote a book about the deep south in Georgia and about disappearing bodies and
Mm.
such back in when was it 1997. That's it, 1997. And it was called Killing God. And it was a similar sort of book. And I sent it off to one of London's top agents, literary agents, Darley Anderson. And he rang me 2 days later. I was in a meeting with my chief executive and he insisted he speak to me. And he said, "I want your book. We want to publish it. We want to work on it. We want you to come join us. Come down to our offices in Fulham as soon as you can," which I did do. And I signed a contract with them then, only to find out, and here's some name drops that you'll know, that
I know what you're going to say.
two other authors had signed with him at a similar time. One being Lee Child, whose book Killing Floor, oddly enough set in Georgia,
Mm.
was being worked on, and also John Connolly, whose first serial killer novel, Every Dead Thing, was also being worked on by the publishers at that time. So I joined at similar time to them. Sadly, my book, Killing God, was offered to 6 publishers, and sadly, they each turned it down. I kept trying with other work, but things happened, life changes in jobs and whatever, and that sort of fell by the wayside. So back in 1997, a whole 3 years ago, I picked up that story again, reread it, and thought what a load of rubbish it was, and how amateurish it was.
You put the title
Killing
in
God.
the new one though. In A Long Way From Home.
Sorry,
Chuckle, you wove the title in.
I didn't quite understand all of that or hear all of that. Sorry.
It's okay. You wove the title Killing God into A Long Way From Home.
Oh yes, I did. Yeah, into the lawyers, the corrupt lawyers. give too much away. The Corrupt Lawyer's Diary. Ah, spoiler
Sorry
alert.
for the steered you
Anyway,
away from that. I'm not into it. I apologise.
anyway, yeah. So I rewrote the book. I kept some ideas that I had in the original, and I called it A Long Way from Home because Chicago's a pretty long way from deep South Georgia. And I maybe I shouldn't say this, but being a bit of a
Well,
rebel,
when has that ever stopped you?
when has it ever stopped me? But I, I could have put the word "dead" in the title somewhere, or and put a funny cover on the front with a woman running away into a forest, I suppose. But I decided not.
Yellow
I
raincoat, red
decided not
raincoat.
red or yellow raincoat. But I decided no, and I called it a long way from home because I don't know. I just felt that that's was good enough for it, you know. But anyway, so that's how that came about. That book.
Shall we point
So
out
it
that
was
there
a.
are some fabulous covers with red and yellow raincoats on before we alienate our author members?
There are some wonderful covers with red and yellow and purple raincoats on of women running away, and
I think
some
we
with
got away
men
with
with
that.
black. Yeah, and some with men with black coats on as well. Who, if you look very, very closely at them, some of them I've seen recently look incredibly like the guy on the cover for the Cormoran Strike novels. It seems that other publishers are tending to use that figure, but change the face a bit. Yeah, there we go. No prizes for originality, eh?
I'm going to move us on to some of the comments on the side. So, T,
Oh,
who is
yeah.
author member TK Gearing, she's one of our admins, TG. She says hi, and so does Kaz. I've got one from
Oh,
Facebook.
hang on, hang on.
Go on.
Sorry, I lost everything there.
Are you
Hi,
good?
TG.
Me,
How you
Brian.
doing? We've exchanged comments on Facebook. Yes.
She's lovely. We've got a few comments from Facebook users saying, hello everyone, Brian, good to see you, evening all. Oh, that must have been Steve Munoz, I assume, because Caroline said, hi, Steve. Sorry if it's the wrong Steve, but that's the one who
Ah,
springs to mind. Cass says, I'm reading Lovecraft Country at the moment and loving it. A Long Way from Home sounds intriguing as well. I may have to look it up. So before you talk about Lovecraft Country, I'm going to tell you what I thought about A Long Way from Home. So before we went live, I briefly
okay.
told you that I've been reading it all day. So I started it about
Yeah.
9:30, 10 o'clock this morning, finished it about 7:15 tonight. I've just sat totally immersed in it, ignored everything else that needed to happen today. Nothing's happened, nothing at all. My husband came in. I was about a third of the way through it, and he said, "So how's it going?" And I'd written on a post-it note. You can't even see it, but it's written there. This book is as good as anything I've ever read. The story spreads and grows, enveloping a whole community. And that I was a third of the way in there, and I hadn't even really got into it.
Oh, right.
I was
Thank you.
just completely immersed in it. I've not even had time to process all of my thoughts of it before we went live because I've only just finished it.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
can't.
That's very kind of you to say so.
Well, it came back in a bit later, and I just looked at him and went spectacular, and went back to it. So he just walked off and left me to it. I've only come up for air at
I'm
tea
not.
time for a little bit, so it's just been a day where I've literally sat immersed. I couldn't have torn myself away if I tried. And every once in a while, because I've read it on my cloud reader on the laptop. Because
Okay.
anyone who knows me knows I can never find my Kindle. It needs one of those little bells or whistles on it. I can't ever find it. So I read it on my laptop, and I just sat there. And every once in a while, I just kept sitting back, going, "Wow," and having a minute, and then going back in. So I can't wait to read
Oh,
everything
really?
else. Yeah, and I'm really thrilled that I asked you before we came on if you were working on another one, and you said yeah.
Yeah, I am. I'm 25, 30,000 words into a follow-up called provisionally called Pushing Fire. And I'm not going to tell you anything about it at the moment, apart from the fact it involves the same characters. Trouble is, I'll give too much away
No, don't say
about
things.
A
No,
Long Way from Home, but
credit.
he gets involved with, or the local sheriff gets him involved with another nasty case,
Okay.
and which also touches on voodoo again. But yeah, it's horrible, and also yes, Charlotte
Stop talking
helps him. Helps him.
before
But
you
yeah,
say
I'm
something
working
you
on it.
regret.
Yes, indeed. And then, okay, sorry, no spoilers.
No spoilers. We will fall out, Mr. Cakes. So,
I'm glad you enjoyed it. I really
oh,
do. That's very nice of you to
honestly,
say that.
just oh, it's not nice. I'm not kind of oh, I'm just. We're gonna have to have another conversation on another day once I've processed and I can actually get words to form.
Sure, it's funny. Everybody that has read it has, including Kath Middleton and Lucy Sampson, and
Hmm.
I think there have been a couple of others. They've really enjoyed it, and they've felt it quite a powerful novel, and so on and so forth. Can I sell it to a literary agent? No. 30 of them have rejected it.
Can't
Don't know
understand it.
why. Don't know why, but it's the way it goes, I guess. And I just don't think it's probably flavour of the month
I don't
or
see how
year.
it can't
Or
be anybody's flavour of anything. I really
you see,
don't.
when I sent the original idea of that off to Darley Anderson all those years ago,
Mm,
it was more amateurishly written, and the reason it got rejected by the publishers, which were Penguin and all the big names, they all said, one, they thought it would make a great film. They thought the descriptive prose and everything was fantastic, but they couldn't get their head around whether it was going to be a fast-paced murder mystery or a more literary work. And they saw it crossing the two, and they could not see that working. It was had to be either one or the other, and so that's what they said. So that's why they rejected it. Whether they may have thought it was an awful load of old rubbish and wanted to be nice, I don't know. But as I say,
I
that's the
don't
way
think they
things
do
go,
that.
isn't it?
I don't think that
But
that's fine.
also, there's the horrible synopsis that every writer hates writing
Hmm.
was appalling. But Darley Anson didn't care. He said, "Oh, I don't care about that. I just threw it to one side and started reading the book." I said, "Okay." So who knows?
Well, I said the
But
same thing,
it's
didn't I?
improved.
I didn't read. I don't read blurbs. I just start reading, and
No,
if something takes me, I go with it. And I was trying to
yeah,
choose
absolutely.
which one to go with next, and I just started, the look inside bit on Amazon. Started having a
Yeah.
little look, and that was it. I just sat there all day, just
Okay.
sat because I was determined I was finishing it before the interview.
Well, I'll have to put a check in the post to you because of all this praise and give you commission on anybody else that buys it then. That's
I'm
what
not
I'll
going
have
to
to
turn
do.
that down. No, but seriously, you're
Yeah.
the writer I want to be when I grow up.
Sorry, what did you say?
You're the writer I want to be when I grow up.
Really? Is that right? Okay, well that's also very kind of you to say so.
So we
I
need to
just I just
go.
happen to like I just happen to like or prefer, shall we say, to write stories that have a lot of depth and meaning about them. They can be as dark and as brutal and as gritty as you like and as bloodthirsty as you like, but I want them to have something about them that is meaningful in terms of characterization
Hmm.
and also the area in which it is set. Even though it's a fictitious town in a fictitious county in Georgia with a fictitious river running through it, everything else around it is factual, including the Okefenokee Swamp, which is a marvel of nature, I have to say. But I try and immerse myself into what I think is should be, and I like to. If I'd have been born an American and wrote Southern literature, that would have suited me down to the ground. You know, that really, really would. People like Ron Rash and Pete Dexter, and I love them. I just love their prose, their style. It's lyrical, and James Sallis, who can write a cracking crime detective novel in 250 pages that has every kind of emotion and characterization in it, and is also hugely intriguing. And, you know, so I don't know, that's my preference. But I had fun with writing The Tin Man and setting it in the UK, especially fairly close to where I live. Even though, again, for that one, I used fictitious town names, but anybody living around here knows exactly what they are. There we go.
Fair enough. So Kaz has actually asked where you're from.
I, well, my birth mother is in Watford. I was born in Bedford and was adopted by two people and lived in a little village on the outskirts of Bedford called Stewartby, um, which, if anybody knows, is where the headquarters of the London Brick Company uh, were. Is now Hanson, but the brickmaking industry has stopped there now. And yeah, so that's where I am from. But the original apple in the eye was in Hertfordshire, in Watford, and that's where all my adoptive family are, apart from my uncle Dennis and Auntie Jilly, who live in a beautiful country house in the wilds of Suffolk, and he writes short stories as well.
So Kaz has sent me a message saying that one of the hellos is Max Sayek, who wrote The Witch Hunter, which is there next to your book. So we interviewed Max a few
Okay.
weeks ago. So he says hi from Finland.
Oh, hi, Max. Hi. Good to meet you via the web. I've not read any of your work, but I
Well,
must now, I
only that one
promise.
so far has been translated into English,
Ah,
but we're working on
okay.
mithering people for the rest. So there's so many things that I wanted to ask you. So somebody else has asked why you use. Well, they've asked, are they set in real or fictional places in America? But we know the fictional. But why fictional? Why
Yeah.
did you not want to go with using a real place?
Well, what I what I have done is researched the real places, and then I've renamed them, and by renaming them, I've been able to change them. Because if I was going to name the actual town or towns and
Mm,
surrounding areas correctly, apart from the ones that have to be done, like the Okefenokee Swamp, people might, or readers, my millions of readers in America might say, "Oi, that's not right." You know, it's not like Waycross, a town near the Okefenokee Swamp, is not like that. So I called it Paradise Creek and changed it around a little bit. And it's in, Marston County, which doesn't exist in Georgia. So that's why. And it's similarly with the Tin Man. I wanted to use towns like Northampton, Wellingborough,
mm,
etc., and Kettering, which is all around me within a few miles. But I thought I need to change certain roads, signs, and do things to fit the story. So I gave them fictitious names, of which I do apologise for at the end of the
mm,
book to any readers that may identify the towns. But I felt if I changed the names, then I could get away with changing some of the detail. And it's a bit like what's his name, the author Peter Robinson, who
mm.
sets all his detective, whoever they are, up in Yorkshire. They're all set in a fictional town. It doesn't exist. So I figured if Peter Robinson, a very prolific and multi-million selling author, can get away with it, then so can I.
Fair enough. I think a lot of people like to do that. They like to have that element of they can change something and not get into
Freedom, you can
trouble. Yeah,
stretch
that
things and change it.
freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, oh, Kaz is being cheeky. I'll do it at the end, Caroline Master. Um, so Kaz likes the look of the bookshelf behind you. You can see the comment. I know anyone watching can see it, but I'll come to that at the end. So she likes the
She
look
likes
of
the
the
look of the
bookshelf.
bookshelf.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just a small bookshelf behind me. In front of me is a much larger one with hundreds of books on it. Um, the bookshelf behind me has all of Linwood Barclay's books on it, all of Stephen King's, um, several others by Michael Marshall Smith, um, and a few more, James Sallis, and a few more. But that's just a small bookshelf.
Plenty to keep
Do
you
you want me
busy
to
then.
move so they can see it more?
There you go.
And there's another bookshelf underneath the painting that's in the middle of it, which was done by my auntie Gilly in Suffolk. But there we go. Very talented family, eh? All very creative.
Somebody has said Burning Man sounds good, and it is. It's absolutely brilliant. And Kaz has said it's not for the faint-hearted, which it is not.
It's no, it's brutal. It is brutal. Yeah, so don't read I Am What I Am, the vampire novella then, because there's some bloody awful things happen in that. There
I,
really are.
I like the fact that you don't shy away from anything. You put all of it's loaded with emotion and realism and all the gritty things, but there are things that you pull back on and leave to the reader's imagination as well. And it was just
Yeah.
the perfect
I,
balance for me.
oh, thank you. Yes, I try. You know, I do. I try and get it right. It's not easy, no matter how much of an
Mm.
experienced writer you are. It's a difficult thing to do. Um, yeah, it is difficult, but that you've got to get the characterization, got to get the depth to it, the grittiness, the plot. But for me, character drives the storyline every time. I'm not a plot-driven person.
But
I
you can
really
see
am
that from
not.
the opening. You can tell that straight away.
Oh, on A Long Way From Home.
Mm.
Are you talking about now?
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. It's very character driven. It really is. I also love the way they speak down south as well, and in Georgia and the southern states. You know, and all the old things like juke joints, which they used to have and probably still do, where the black communities would go dance, and yeah, I just love anything to do with blues and jazz and that kind of feel.
So there was a brief
Mm,
element in A Long Way From Home of the club that they go to. And I can't think for the
yeah,
life of
the
me what
juke
it's
joint.
called. Yeah, the juke joint and the
Louis
well,
Shines,
thank you, Louis
Louis
Shanks.
Shines juke joint.
It's driving me mad. I've read it today, so it's not had time to kind of sink yet.
Sink
Um,
in.
yeah, just see, we can't even talk about that because for such a brief scene, so much happens.
Yeah, it's you give everything away.
I need to let's move on. Somebody said,
let's
"Oh, good,
let's move on.
order it then." So yeah, definitely do.
Was
Oh, Phil Jordan has just asked. Hi, Phil. What comes first when you start a new novel, the character or the plot idea? Well, you've just answered that one. Why is
yeah,
character so important for you? Why is getting that absolutely spot on so important?
because we're human beings, aren't we? And we have emotion, and we have thought processes, and we have angst, and we have happiness and sadness and melancholy and horror happening in our lives. Not all the time, but some of us do more than others.
Mm,
But all of us have these things at times. And although you can pretty much pick up any crime novel, and there's some poor sod who's an alcoholic and lost his wife and whatever, and there's nothing different in A Long Way From Home about that.
mm.
But that's what drives me. it's it, yeah, it's got to be the person first to me. The character, the situation, the location, and the plot is almost secondary. Yeah, it really is. There are a lot of very fast, very good reads out there that are very, very plot driven,
Mm.
and they don't really turn me on at all. I do want heavy description about the atmosphere and about the location and the scenery and think I almost voraciously read that kind of stuff. Other people find it boring. I don't, because to me that sets the atmosphere, because then you feel like you are in that place.
Yeah.
I mean, I have never ever been to the States, so I've never been to Georgia.
Which is
It's all
astonishing
been done by.
reading it.
Sorry?
It's astonishing to hear that after reading the book.
Well, again, thank you. But that's what Darley Anderson said to me when he rang me up. He said, "When did you last go to the States?" And I said, "I've never been." He said, "I find that hard to believe." He said, "Because I can really feel the heat, taste the dust, feel the atmosphere." He says, "It's fantastic." And he went mental over it and raved over it. Sadly, the publishers didn't want it. There we go. But it's kind of that To Kill a Mockingbird, you know. Um, what's the other very famous book? Purple. Um,
Catcher in the Rye?
no, not Catcher in the Rye.
No,
Purple something or other. The title's not coming to me at the
The Colour
moment.
Purple.
The Colour Purple. It's very much south and what's happening with the communities, because they're so divided. I mean, the white community of Paradise Creek,
Mm.
and the black community that live in the bottoms near the swamp, and the difference in in how they're brought up and how they live and their homes and things like that.
Mm.
And it's still to this day. But back in the 60s and the 40s and the 50s, when racial segregation was even worse, um, it was awful, absolutely awful. They were treated as second-class citizens. They really, really were. And they in Georgia itself. Oh yeah, another thing. I wanted a state that also had a terrible reputation for lynching black people. That doesn't sound very nice, but Georgia second in the 60s to Mississippi, the most illegal lynchings in the whole of the USA.
Wow.
Um, and not good, not good at all. But I
Yeah.
felt that really added everything. And I do, in the book, quote some snippets of history here and there, which are actual factual history, which I hope do not deter from the book, but rather add to it.
Add a depth to it. Yeah.
And yeah, and when Tom Bale meets the old man outside the hardware store or
Yeah.
grocery store, and he
Lucas.
sits and has a chat with this old guy, um, and this old guy who's a very well-read black American, 80 odd years of age, but he starts talking to him about slavery and his grandfathers, and about certain laws that were passed down, which were called Jim Crow laws, rather, that people will know about that. But I
Mm.
found that the whole thing that happened in the Deep South and the race segregation, fascinating,
Yeah.
absolutely fascinating.
I love what you did with Lucas and Dan, actually. Their
Did
relationship,
you?
their friendship.
Their friendship, yeah. Yeah, there's good white people here and there, even in the South.
God, I hope so. So, do you have a favourite character or relationship, rather, that you've created?
Oh,
Doesn't have to be a
well, I like
romantic
Tom.
one, just anything at all.
Quite long, like Tom Bale a lot.
Mm.
Um, he's a deep thinking man who has got a heart of gold, and really, he cares. And that's the thing. That's what I want people to do: care. Not just going to be this man that goes around, saving people's lives without much thought about it, and just some hero. But I don't want to portray him like that.
Yeah.
Even though my uncle Dennis, short story writer that he is, and very good at it,
Mm.
read the book and said, "Oh, he's a bit Jack Reacher, isn't he?" I thought, what? That wasn't written like that at all. And would you say it was Jack Reacher? I wouldn't. He
Um,
thought it was. It goes to show what sort of take people have on things.
confession time.
Maybe
Haven't
that's
read
why
any Jack
Lucy
Reacher.
Sampson likes him.
Maybe, but I
That's
haven't
why
read.
Lucy Sampson likes him, because she's in love with Jack Reacher.
She is. Hi, Lucy. She's watching as
But
well.
I like Tom's character very much, and the other character I really like is John Kane, who the assassin in the vampire story. I love him. I had great fun writing him. I really, really did. And if anybody reads that, please excuse the very direct opinions about politics, life, Christianity, the Catholic Church, all of which play a part in this book. John Kane does have a rather, shall we say, straight ahead thought process on all of that. It will offend some people. there is a warning at the beginning of it.
Produces debate.
Sorry?
I've just noticed a message from Lucy saying that I'm a bit muffled tonight. Lucy, is that still the same? I hadn't noticed that, so I've messed about with my microphone a little, but we'll see.
I'm muffled.
No, me.
Oh, you? Yeah, it is a bit, but I can hear you okay, apart from the odd word here and there.
Okay.
But I'll just zone out as and when I'm necessary, as when.
So somebody has
I,
asked, do you prefer writing crime or horror? Do you have a preference?
well, horror is a thing I've just recently gotten into, and I've found a great deal of fun in it because it's as free as it can be. You could say and do the most outlandish things in horror. They don't have to make sense at all, and you can get away with it as long as you put enough mystery and intrigue and shocks and suspense in it. You've got to be credible, of course, but I do prefer crime. But horror is not going to go away. I've started these sort of short stories, and I will continue with them because they're a tremendous amount of fun. I even caught myself the other day starting to write a zombie short story. I thought, how many of those are there out there? But there again, how many of haunted houses are there and vampire stories are there out there? I like to think I've done something a little bit different. And Kath, bless her, she read one of the horror short stories called Heart and Soul, which is about the haunted house. She gave it a 5-star and thought it was a bit different. So
Well, I
that
look
was good
forward
of her.
to reading
But
it.
again, I have to keep sending her checks and commissions, the payments. But it's just one of the things you have to do.
Kath,
But I
just don't
much
give out
prefer crime.
compliments that are unneeded or unsubstantiated. I've just changed microphones, so I'm hoping that's making me a bit clearer now.
It's about the same for me, but yeah, I prefer crime. I'm sticking to crime because I've got the follow up to A Long Way From Home.
Mm.
Started 30 odd thousand words into it. I've got the follow up to The Tin Man, started 25,000 words into that. And I've also started, because the other day for the UK CBC shorts, Halloween shorts, I kicked it off this year with a short story about a serial killer. And somebody said I should keep writing serial killer novels. So I've actually started a proper serial killer novel as well, and I'm 12,000 words into that. My problem is I get easily distracted,
I've
and
noticed.
something pops into my head, and I start writing a different story. Then I think, Christ, I've got to go back to the follow up to The Tin Man, or I've got to go back to a follow up for A Long Way From Home, and keep doing them. But I suppose not being professionally, if that's the right term, published.
Hmm.
I am free to chop and change where I like, and I'm not on a time schedule. But being honest, I would love to be professionally published. I know some people say, "Oh, don't bother with it. You earn more money as a self-published author," and they probably do. But I have spent no money at all trying to advertise my books, my self-published books, and that's maybe where I'm going wrong. I don't know, but I've hardly promoted them. They've been on Facebook, word of mouth, this UK CBC site. That's it. Maybe I should do more.
I think you need to. I think we need to get you out there. I've messed about with my volume and microphone a bit, so hopefully people can hear me a bit
Okay.
more. But we
Yeah,
have
I
got
can hear
so
you
many.
clearly.
Brilliant. We've got so many. I've just picked it up on my phone because we've got so many comments and I can't see who any of them are from. So we've got lots from Lucy Sampson, Jason Kelly, Leslie Lloyd, Joe Singleton. Hello everyone. Will Templeton. Are we likely to see any more of Brooks?
Are we likely to see any more books?
Brooks.
Oh, Brooks. Ah, now isn't it funny you should say that? I thoroughly enjoyed writing Brooks, and again I thought, oh, shall I do something different for the the criminal shorts? And I hope that people do consider it different. And yeah, you probably are, because an idea came to me the other day that I could probably write, and it was because Dean Koontz did it, the famous
Mm.
Dean Koontz. He's got a was it him? Ooh, yeah. Dean Koontz has written a series of short stories about a man who goes off and helps other people and does this and does that and sorts issues out, punches bad guys on the nose and things like that. And so does the wonderful, oh God, who's American writer, his name did the Matt Scudder series. I can't remember his name off the top of
Not
my head.
familiar.
He's written hundreds of books. He's written hundreds of fantastic books about the PI Max Scudder, based in New York, and he wrote a book which has got a lot of short stories in it called Hitman, which is fantastic. And this guy just goes from one event to another, and that popped into my head, and I thought, I wonder if I can do something like that with Brooks. So watch the space, Will. Watch the space.
Hmm. Well, Caroline's just messaged me 5 minutes left. That hour has absolutely flown. How have we
Oh
got
bloody
five
hell!
minutes? We could have done 2 hours. We could have done four. Me and you can
Well,
talk
I don't want to
forever.
bore people to death. I'll be hearing people snore down the other side of the microphone. Oh,
So,
there's one here that says,
oh,
"Do I prefer writing long or short stories?"
mm,
To be perfectly honest, um, I find short stories wonderful. I love reading them. I love reading novellas.
mm.
And although I've written a novel with 100,000 words and a novel with 70,000 words, which is not that big, really, by today's standards, my favorite is novella size. I love novellas because when you go back to the 1940s and you see writers like Raymond Chandler and um, my favourite, James M. Cain, who wrote The Postman Always Rings Twice and Double Indemnity. They're literally a couple of my favourite books of all time. And what he does in 120 pages, a lot of writers can't do in 250, 300. So novellas are my thing. I love them. They just don't sell that well, unfortunately.
Well,
People
let's
either
have a
want
look
something
why
that's about.
that is. I don't understand it.
No, I don't understand it either. But again, I think that comes down to literary agents and publishers. They want things which are going to sell easily, which you can understand, and make them money. So the average 350 page, novel is the thing. But it's not something I. Well, if I ever get published, they may hold me to it. They may demand 120,000 words every time, but I'll fight that battle if and when I ever get to it. But for now, novellas are the thing for me, and stories that are 200, 250 pages long. I love them, especially authors that can write, like Ron Rash. I mean, he's just phenomenal what he crams into a book. They're so lyrical. They really are. They're almost like, even though some of them are crime and murder mysteries, it's almost poetry the way he writes, and that's what I like. And
Well,
I
I'm going
always
to get
say that.
into. Oh.
No, carry on, carry on. I'm just waffling like I do.
I was going to say we've got a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to ask you to show off your covers again. Before you
My
start, I'm
covers
going to
again.
I'm going to give us a cheeky plug because you have
Yeah,
a
criminal
short
shorts.
story. So tell everyone about that.
Say that again, sorry.
So what's your short story called in Criminal
Oh yeah,
Short?
short story.
And don't give plot
Brooks, and
away.
it's a conversation between two men.
And I think
That's
that's all
it.
you need to say. Yeah.
And one of them is
Okay.
a politician, and the other guy is a fixer. That's as much as I'm going to say. And it all happens in an apartment. That's it.
Well, thoroughly enjoyed it. And
I've got to
I'm
read
not.
yours yet, Sam.
You did promise me some honest feedback, so
I did. I
no
did.
biting.
And I'm going to do it. I'm just swamped
A
with
million things going
working
on
full
here.
time and a million things.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's Criminal Shorts. Give us a flash of your other covers before
Give us a
we
flash.
finish. I did end with of your other covers. Behave.
So, Long Way from Home. Okay, 1961, set in Georgia.
Yep.
The book that Sam has been raving about
Oh,
tonight.
love it.
Consequences, 4 short stories, um, and a shorter version of The Burning Man in here, all with a twist in the tale you won't see coming, I promise you. Well, hopefully. The Tin Man, crime, detective, private eye, lots of blackmail intrigue, set in the UK. What else can I say? Bit brutal in places, some
Don't give
murders,
it
usual
away.
sort of stuff, and a very, very unique ending, in my opinion. Humble that I may be. I am what I am. Horror, vampires. Uh, that's a novella. The Burning Man, an extension of the short story in Consequences. A brutal weekend trying to avoid the mob and drugs, set in America. At the end, 3 short stories, monsters in the vast forests of Maine, USA, a country house mystery ghost story in the UK, and a horror writer that descends into madness or wicked reality, whichever way you look at it. All thought provoking, I like to think. There you
I'd
go.
imagine it
What
would be
else have I
after
done? Oh,
covering
yeah.
today. Go on.
Plus a load of UK CBC shorts for Halloween, Christmas, and God knows what else, which I have been so pleased to do because they're great fun. And also the Criminal Shorts UK CBC anthology, which I was really happy to provide a story for, and even happier when it was accepted. Very proud.
Well, we're very grateful for the donated story as well. All
It's
that's
no
left to
problem
say
at all.
is thank you to you and thank you to all of the members and admins who've asked a million questions that I've not even had chance to get to. I'll have to have a look through that afterwards. But lots of people joining in with us tonight, which is lovely. Thank you
Yeah,
so
that's
much.
great. Thank you.
And
Yeah, thank you
as I
too,
said,
Sam.
next
Thanks for
time
setting it up.
she gets you.
Say that again.
As I said, you have to come back, and next time she gets to interview you.
Is that right?
Thanks, Brian.
But we'll have to have a chat again and see where we go with it and bounce ideas around. But it's really, really been good to talk to you. Thank you, everybody, for joining in, asking your questions, and thank you, UKCBC.